You're listening to WSTU Stewart.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie.
The opinions on this program are those of the program host and guest and not necessarily those of WPSL. WPSL does not endorse products that may be mentioned. Any reproduction or retransmission of this broadcast is strictly prohibited without written consent of WPSL. Legal questions? Ask a lawyer. Give us a call at 340-1590, 340-1590 here at the studios of WPSL. And Ask a Lawyer with your host, attorney Stuart M. Address.
Good morning. I am Stuart Address, and this is Ask a Lawyer for February, I think it's 7th, 2020. This is actually the first show of year 3 for Ask a Lawyer. So
3
nice.
years now.
Well, it's 2 years, and this is starting 3.
Wow.
We'll see if we make it through it.
Okay.
Maybe we'll get canceled.
Ooh, I hope not.
No, me too.
How are we going to ever get to ask a lawyer?
Anyway, welcome to those of you who listen regularly and are new on WPSL, and also relatively new, simulcasting on WSTU 1450 AM in Stewart. So welcome to everybody, and give us a call at 772-340-1590. It doesn't matter what I'm talking about. If you want to talk about it, we'll try. And if I can answer the question, I will. If I can't, I'll tell you. That's what lawyers are often paid for. We're paid to research. We don't always know the answer to the questions, especially if it's not an area of the law we practice all the time. So, I have often discussed straight legal issues on the show. I've discussed politics a lot more lately, because it intersects with the law. And, in many ways, I look at it as I watch what goes on in Congress and in the judiciary because of its impact on my practice. We got Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which deals with discrimination and sexual harassment. We got the Americans with Disabilities Act. We got the Older Workers Benefit Protection Act that I deal with, Section 1983, which are civil rights claims. And so, I am interested in what goes on in good old Washington, D.C., and also what goes on in the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, which is our federal court here. So let's talk a little bit. Always, I never get to the thing I've been planning. But, we just had a major event in our country. We just had the conclusion of a impeachment trial in the Senate. And believe it or not, folks, I am going to try to discuss this, because what I'm going to discuss, I'm going to try to discuss from a very nonpartisan perspective. Those of you who listen know I'm a Democrat. Okay? Those of you who listen know that I really cannot stand the current president. But for the purposes of this discussion, and your comments are always welcome, I want to discuss a particular issue, nonpartisan, because I'm going to compliment Republicans too. And it's the issue of the role of the Senate. And that's really been in the news. Last week we talked a lot about the Senate as a deliberative body and how it's supposed to differ from the House. So let me give you 2 final quotes on that issue, which will lead really into the issue of the day. Long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, President James Buchanan called the Senate, quote, the greatest deliberative body in the world, end quote. And that moniker has stood for about 150 years in our 244-year history as a country. However, recently, in her outgoing address, Senator Claire McCaskill, a Democrat from Missouri, said that the United States Senate is no longer the world's greatest deliberative body, and everybody needs to quit saying it until we recover from this period of polarization and the fear of the political consequences of tough votes. Well, that foreshadowed what happened this week in the Senate whether I agree or disagree, and everybody knows where I stand with how the votes turned out this week in the Senate, this was monumental in the history of our country. Whether you believe it was a witch hunt, or whether you believe that this guy should be dragged out on his ear, it was still a monumental moment in history. Only the third time there has been an impeachment trial of the President of the United States, 244 years. And there's been a lot of discussion on the news that I listen to about lions of the Senate. And I've heard that phrase before. And in fact, after Senator McCain passed away, we did a show on the bipartisan comments about Senator McCain and his importance and value to the Senate and to the country. And he was a lion of the Senate. And he will always be remembered as a lion of the Senate. And I mentioned then that I often disagreed with his policies, but I never doubted the sincerity and integrity of his views. He came to differing conclusions than I did often, but I knew he meant it. He had thought about it. It wasn't just, from the hip. And we've had other lions of the Senate throughout our history, many of them. And right now, D.C. is as partisan as it has been in 244 years. So let's take a look at just some of the lions of the Senate and transition our way into today. In 2019, just last year, the Senate lost Senators Birch Bayh, a Democrat, and Richard Lugar, a Republican. And according to Politico magazine, as titans of the Senate, they lived their lives like political photo negatives of each other. Their deaths seem to have the end of an era of larger-than-life, change-making senators who worked across the aisle. Lawmakers known more for their accomplishments than viral moments in hearings or hits on cable television. In 2009, Time magazine wrote, "If the only thing you knew about Ted Kennedy was his national reputation, the liberal lion, the fiercest of partisans, then the results of a poll this past April, in 2009, by the Hill newspaper would have seemed surprising. Asked to name which of their colleagues was the easiest to work with across the aisle, Republicans cited Kennedy as number one." And it was also written in that same article, as his Republican colleague John McCain once said, "Kennedy was, quote, the single most effective member of the Senate if you want to get results," end quote. Kennedy and McCain, Lugar and Bayh, McCain and Feingold, Campaign Finance Act. Then we have the Bipartisan Policy Center in evaluating some of the lions of the Senate. They said several things, and it goes over a certain period of time. While Americans were fighting overseas in World War II, many congressional Republicans were increasingly wary of a lengthy American involvement in Europe, and after the war ended. Among those isolationists, Michigan Republican Senator Arthur Vandenberg was the unofficial spokesman, but seeing Democrats and Republicans growing increasingly polarized about America's role in the world, while recognizing the threat of a remilitarized Germany and Japan might pose, Vandenberg was moved to address the Senate in 1945, declaring that no country could immunize itself from the rest of the world. Vandenberg offered his cooperation to Franklin Delano Roosevelt in post-war planning that eventually encompassed America's role in both the United Nations and NATO. Years later, Vandenberg summed up his view of bipartisan foreign policy this way. In a word, it simply seeks national security ahead of partisan advantage. Politics, he said, stops at the water's edge. And for a very, very, very long time it did. for a very, very long time, whether our president was Republican or Democrat. When that president was overseas, there were no negative comments made about the president, particularly in foreign policy. In 1964, Senator Everett Dirksen, a Republican, one of the Senator office buildings is named after him, said the Senate's Democratic leaders needed Republican votes to stop the filibuster, and Democratic Majority Leader Mike Mansfield asked his counterpart, Republican Senator Everett Dirksen, to step in. Quote, I appeal to the distinguished minority leader, whose patriotism has always taken precedence over his partisanship, to join with me in finding the Senate's best contribution to the resolution of this grave national issue. Now, Dirksen did more than join with Mansfield. He exhorted his colleagues to end not just the filibuster, but America's difficult past, and bring the Civil Rights Act to a vote. Quote, I appeal to all senators, he told the chamber. We are confronted with a moral issue. Today, let us not be found wanting. And of course, this is one of the primary areas of law I practice, the Civil Rights Act. So I'm thankful to both of them. And 1990, regarding the Americans with Disabilities Act, another area of law in which I practice. Quote, seeing the need to protect a minority from discrimination, members of Congress on both sides of the aisle came together to pass the Americans with Disabilities Act. Bipartisan Policy Center founders, Senators Bob Dole, Republican, and George Mitchell, Democrat, were early supporters of the law and were instrumental in its passage. And now we do have a call from Jeff on line one. Hi, Jeff. How can I help you?
Hey, Stuart. Listen, quick question.
Sure.
If Biden's kid was getting paid these millions of dollars for doing nothing, and it was all a thing, and he's obviously getting payments from China too, would you want to know that? Because to me it seems like, all right, well, so we go give them $1 billion, and out of that $1 billion they pay back to people, and that's our taxpayer money. They pay back, they pay these, little hush money payments, whatever you want to call them. I don't know.
You realize there's already been an investigation, right?
When?
And the investigation's already determined that there was nothing improper going on. Now,
that's
also,
not true.
It is
that
true.
Is incorrect.
It is true.
They have not
but I would agree with you that what Hunter Biden did was distasteful. And, if I were his father, I certainly would have discouraged him from doing it. There was no quid pro quo. That has been investigated. But it has the appearance of impropriety, and it should never have occurred.
Well, okay, then you're on the same page I am.
I'm on the page you are to the extent that I don't believe it should have occurred. I'm not on the same page believing that it was legally improper. I just think it smells bad. It doesn't pass the smell test.
Yeah, and when you start seeing a pattern of it, it sort of makes your head spin.
No,
I guess there's
I'm not sure what the pattern is.
About
Chinese
are paying them off too.
Well, I mean, look, Trump asked Russia for help with emails. He asked China to help for emails. He's asked Ukraine for help with investigations. I mean, let's, if we're going to compare apples to apples, let's do apples to apples, not apples to oranges.
Well, in an investigation, obviously don't say that because they obviously went to Russia to get information on Trump to begin with. But
they didn't go to Russia. They went to somebody who was in private practice. They went to somebody who's in private practice.
Is that legal to do that?
Yeah, it is.
If I was to call you up and say, Stuart, I'm going to run against so-and-so, and I want you to dig down and find out as much dirt about him as I
absolutely
possibly
legal. That's called Oppo research.
And you're allowed to do that?
Everybody does it. And if they didn't do it, they're fools. Because you do want to find out everything you can about your political opponent that you're running against. Now, whether you use everything you find is both a moral, an ethical, and a legal question. But to find it out Absolutely, I would want to know everything I could know. Now, would I want to know it from a source that was illegal? Would I want to know it from a foreign government? Absolutely, positively not.
You wouldn't want to know if they were overseas doing illegal stuff?
I would not, no, I didn't say that, but I would not want that information provided to me by a foreign government or its surrogate. In that respect, when the approach is made, the law says you're supposed to notify the FBI.
Right.
And that's Democrat or Republican. I don't care. If I found a Democrat doing that and not telling the FBI when they were approached by a foreign government or a surrogate, I would castigate that Democrat as well.
Well, see, this is the thing that, he obviously was asking him for help when he called and said, fire that guy that he wanted to get fired because the investigation was getting close to.
Well, no, see, that's your interpretation. But everybody seems to agree that that prosecutor in Ukraine was as dishonest as the day is long. So for Biden to be instructed to get rid of him could have nothing to do with Hunter Biden being on the board of Burisma. I mean, I know I don't like coincidences as a lawyer, but there are such things as coincidences. And there is no doubt that that prosecutor was a fraud.
Now, my question to you is whether they're Democrat or not. Would you want to know this information before they became president of the United States and then it becomes a bigger mess?
Would I want to know the information? Sure,
Somebody involved with that?
Sure.
I mean,
when we know the information, and we can evaluate it. I don't think you go into an extended investigation when there has been an investigation that concluded that there was nothing legally improper. Now I think to do more of that.
You fly over there on Air Force One with your dad. You go to see the people that thing. You get offered the job, I guess, as your dad's there with you. I don't know.
I don't think you. So you're making assumptions now. That's not true.
Well, I'm going to
give me your source for that information, and please tell me it's not Rush Limbaugh or Fox News.
I'm going to change my last name to Schiff here pretty soon, and then you'll listen to me.
Are you Shifty?
Yeah, I'm Shifty. I'm Jeff the Shifty.
All right, Jeff. Thank you. Thank you for your call.
Take care, boy.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, well, sometimes we can agree to disagree. Sometimes we can agree on small things. I do agree that things that have the appearance of impropriety are really not very good ideas to proceed with. Anyway, all right. So just a couple more on this topic before we get into my real point here. 2018, the Associated Press wrote, John McCain is being remembered as the last lion of the Senate, with the others matching his stature. And what is a lion of the Senate? Been hearing that phrase a lot. Well, AP said lions are senators who can put country and institution ahead of their party and constituency, and who have the power to make a difference. That's an interesting definition. Well, one of the points I really want to make today is I think somebody else just became a lion of the Senate, and that's Mitt Romney. Now, no matter how you feel about his vote, no matter how you feel about him being the first member in the Senate to ever vote to convict a president of his own party, 244 years, however you feel about him or his vote or his policies, and I tend not to agree with his policies, obviously, I think that in the speech he gave as to how he was going to vote and why, only a couple people, and they're in a big White House at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, only a couple people can really castigate him and question his faith and question the integrity of the vote. And as they say, stay tuned. We will get back to that topic after we hear from Paul on line 1. Hey, Paul.
Hi, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I just have a question.
Sure.
On the articles of impeachment, I can see how people can argue till they're blue in the face about Article 1 as far as, can you do this, then, da-da-da-da. But Article 2, there's no doubt it was obstruction of Congress. I don't understand that.
All right, here's my take on that, and it's interesting. You know, Mitt Romney voted to convict on Article 1 and to acquit on Article 2. And I had interpreted that myself well before the topic of what would Mitt do came up. And I've even spoken about that on this show. My initial reaction is he's guilty of sin. He's absolutely obstructed Congress. He gave a blanket instruction to the entire executive department not to cooperate. How much more obstructionist can you be? On the other hand, when it comes to such a significant vote as to whether to remove the President of the United States, the House made no effort to go to the judicial branch to try to enforce its subpoenas. And I understand its reasoning. I understand that they realized how long it would take. And I understand they didn't want it to go into the election. And their reasoning was just, and it was right, and it was moral. But still, the fact that the House failed to make an effort to get the judicial branch to come to grips with and make a decision between a dispute between the executive and the legislative, which is the way it's supposed to work, I can understand voting not guilty. Not innocent, remember. It's not the way our whole criminal system works. It's not the way the impeachment system works. I can understand voting not guilty. I'll give you an example. I can understand voting not guilty just for the failure of the House to use the judicial branch. Now, as I said, not guilty doesn't mean innocent. It just means not guilty. In the good old O.J. Simpson case, maybe I'll get a flood of calls on this. When he was found not guilty in the criminal trial, now, I believe he's guilty of sin. But not guilty, in my view, way back then, was the correct verdict. Because the state had not proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt. It had screwed up in so many ways with the evidence and with Mark Furman and with the glove that not guilty was the right verdict. It wasn't innocent. And then in the civil case, where the burden of proof is so much less, of course he was properly found responsible for the same deaths. So not guilty is a very technical term. And, President Trump right now screaming about how he has been vindicated, bullpucky. That's not what it means. It means that you were just found not guilty. It doesn't mean you were found innocent, dummy. And I'm not speaking to you, Paul. Speaking to Washington.
Well, it just seems to me as if Congress, with their vote, has given up their right to investigate.
Amen.
And that's
I agree.
all messed up.
The House did what it should have done. I understand the Republicans control the Senate. But to me, this was a question of, are you going to abdicate the legislative branch's role under the Constitution, or are you going to enforce it? And I do believe that the Congress as a whole has been weakened. I hope that it can quickly be restored, because there's always been tension between the legislative branch and the president. Always.
I mean, you think of the things that have been brought up in this trial, that is now, because it's, acquitted, apparently, that if a president thinks it's good for him to do something, that now that makes it legal because it's in the best interest that he gets
Well,
reelected.
wasn't that an interesting argument of his lawyers? If he thinks it's in the best interest for him to be reelected, you can do whatever you want. May I ask you a question? Have you ever heard of any politician running for any office who didn't believe it was in the best interest of the public that he be elected?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So it was a stupid legal argument.
It sets a horrible future precedent. What I think.
I agree with you, and if this was in, civil or criminal courts, and that argument was made about anybody, a judge would have laughed the judge out of the courtroom. It's absurd. Thank you, Paul. Thank you for your call. All right, talking about Mitt Romney. Okay, he said a few things in his speech. I want to quote from a very few portions of the speech. But before I do, I want to tell you what I told my almost 16-year-old son that very evening. I told him, you have to listen to this speech. And you have to watch the speech. Not because of what Mitt Romney actually said in substance in terms of his vote, but because I knew it was a historic speech once I heard it. I heard it live in the car. And when it was done, before anybody on the radio, CNN, MSNBC said a word, I said to myself, a profile in courage. I knew, as he did, what that vote was going to cost him. And to have the backbone to make that vote anyway told me something about Mitt Romney. Now, I'm not sorry I didn't vote for him when he ran for president. I'm happy who I voted for. And I'm still not going to agree with most of Mitt Romney's policies. As he says, he's voted with the president 80% of the time. But I will never question Mitt Romney's sincerity when he reaches a decision on a piece of legislation. I will never question whether he sincerely and truly and honestly believes in the position he is advocating, just as I respected John McCain in that way. By doing what he did just a couple days ago, by knowing what was going to happen to him as a result, he has demonstrated everything he needs to demonstrate, at least to me, to give him the benefit of the doubt anytime in the future on a policy, even that I disagree with, that at least he really believes what he's saying. And that's integrity. And it's sorely lacking in Democrats and Republicans all throughout Congress and in the executive branch. But let's look at a few of the things that Mitt Romney said, because they were so important. I mean, you know, I have a bachelor's in political science. You know, I coach a speech and debate team. You know, I was involved in speech and debate myself for 7 years. I heard that speech and I understood what was going on. That speech took hours and hours and hours and days to craft. With the assistance, I'm sure, of a speechwriter. Words were carefully chosen, not just for the impact on the Senate floor today, but for what was going to be looked at 100 years from now. That is a speech that will go down in history. There's a category in speech competition called declamation. My son's going to be doing it in a few weeks. And declamation is reciting from memory a famous speech given in the past. And when I was doing it way back, in the mid-'70s, you know, I did Patrick Henry's Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death speech. I thought that was a pretty powerful speech, and I enjoyed doing it. My son's going to be doing a speech from Elie Wiesel, and that he gave at a dedication of a library at a Catholic university. Very fascinating speech about interfaith cooperation, trust, and general goodness in the world, notwithstanding what he went through in the Holocaust. Powerful speech. I think Mitt Romney's is equal. I think Mitt Romney's speech is going to go down in the annals of history, is going to be studied, and how carefully crafted his language was. One of the things he said is, I swore an oath before God to exercise impartial justice. I take an oath before God as enormously consequential. I knew from the outset that being tasked with judging the president, the leader of my own party, would be the most difficult decision I have ever faced. I was not wrong. From those two sentences alone, you could tell how he approached his vote. Whatever his decision was going to be, how he approached it. And that whatever his faith is, and we all know what it is, doesn't matter, that whatever his faith is, he takes it very seriously, and he takes an oath before God very seriously. Unlike, frankly, most people. He also said, in the last several weeks, I have received numerous calls and texts, Many demand that, in their words, I stand with the team. I can assure you that that thought has been very much on my mind. But my promise before God to employ impartial justice required that I put my personal feelings and biases aside. Were I to ignore the evidence that has been presented and disregard what I believe my oath and the Constitution demands of me for the sake of a partisan end, it would, I fear, listen to these words carefully, it would, I fear, expose my character to history's rebuke and the censure of my own conscience. So he is looking to history. He is looking as to how will his vote be interpreted. And from his perspective, if he doesn't stand firm and vote whichever way he's going to vote, but vote with backbone, he believes that in the future history will look back and call him out on it. And more than that, he wouldn't be able to live with his own conscience. But then he went on, irrespective of these things, with my vote, I will tell my children and their children that I did my duty to the best of my ability, believing that my country expected it of me. So, in my view, when I heard that, he wants his kids, his grandkids, to look at him with pride, not to think that he caved. And then the last part that I want to talk about, in an attempt to avoid partisanship, I say that you can agree or disagree with, that's my words, sorry, with Senator Romney's position. But the one thing which can't be done in anyone's good conscience is to say he took his responsibilities with anything less than serious sobriety and contemplation upon its impact today and in the future throughout history. And really, for that reason, I view him as a lion of the Senate, the newest one, and whether he is voted out in 4 years after one term because of this vote, or whether his constituency in Utah continue to reelect him, whenever his length of time of service in the Senate is, I think that in the end, whether it's now or 20 years or 50 years from now, you will look back and view Senator Romney as one of the most respected of senators, equal to many of those that I referenced today and so many others that I didn't reference, and illustrative of what is sorely lacking in politics today. Politics is not a dirty word. It has become a dirty word. Politics is politics. Politics is negotiation. Politics is compromise. Politics is diplomacy. Politics is considering whether to take up arms against another nation. That's politics. That's what our country is based upon. It's politics. But when politics become horse trading and, pay to play and all this other mishigas, then politics becomes a dirty word. And it has become a dirty word. We need more lions of the Senate. We need them in the House as well. We need people who go to Congress to do good and to understand that in order to do good and to accomplish anything, you're going to have to compromise with the other party. That means you're going to have to be able to work with them. Now, I'll admit, I probably would not have made the greatest senator or congressman, even though I once thought I wanted to do that, because compromise does not come easy to me. And when I believe in a position, I believe in it fiercely. But maybe I wasn't cut out for that role. But those are the people we need in Congress and in the Senate. We need those people who go there who understand that it is the art of compromise. It is better to get 3/4 of a loaf if you're in the majority than no loaf because you couldn't get the minority to come along with you and wasn't willing to give them anything. And that's how legislation is crafted. I've said this on other shows. You can never come out with a perfect piece of legislation. The Civil Rights Act was not all passed in one time. Not every part of the Civil Rights Act. Title VII was not part of the original Civil Rights Act. It dealt with busing and a couple other things, voting. So I think, we do have, and I'm going to go to him again. We have Jeff again on line one in a moment, but I do think that if we refuse to listen to the other side, if we refuse to try to understand where they're coming from and why, if we can't have a robust but respectful debate, we are doomed to decades of increasing animosity, and it does nothing to improve our country, our economy, our foreign policy. It does nothing to improve our standing in the world. And I'm going to tell you something. Other people have said it too, Republicans and Democrats. And I truly, truly believe it. If we lose standing in the world, if we can no longer be relied upon, it is not only we who suffer, the world suffers. We are a great country. We are the most powerful nation in the world. We have to stand tall. And I just hope that, we had a lot of people elected in 2018, a lot of women, minorities. I hope that continues. Young people. I hope that they come in with more backbone and do what they believe is right, even if it means going against their party. Especially when it means that. Especially when it means they might lose their job. Because they don't do that. This country is going to HE double hockey sticks in a handbasket. And I don't want to see it go there. All right, let's go. If he's still there, Jeff again on line one. You still there, Jeff?
I would vote for you if you went and ran for senator or if you ran for the president.
Thank you.
I appreciate your honesty, and you are a man of conviction. And I don't think they could waiver you with all the bullshit that they put on your head when you go to Washington. I don't know what they do to these
Well,
guys, but
I appreciate that. I don't think I'll ever be serving. I think I probably speak out too much to get elected. I thought once of maybe being a judge, but I don't think I'd have the support to become a judge either.
I'll tell you what, I think they're mistaking a very good human being that could work on that. Anyway, when your beliefs, your personal religious beliefs, now not in this case, but in any case,
Yep.
I hear him say the word "I" all the time. Supposed to out. They sent him up there to vote what they're thinking, not what he's. You see where
Well,
I'm
now
coming
that's
from?
an interesting. I'm not so sure you're right. We've had this discussion too. When a person is elected, are they elected to do what their constituency wants? Or are they elected to exercise their own judgment as to what is best for the country? Those are two different philosophies. And I think everybody can have their own opinion, and I think that opinion is right. But they are two different philosophies. And you should know when you're voting for somebody, what's their philosophy? Do they believe they're supposed to do what the constituency wants? Or do they believe they're elected to exercise their judgment based upon the information they have? Because that's very important.
Well, I was just concerned. That's a simple fact that when you hear the word "I" when they're up there talking, they're not there because of I. They're there because of we.
They're there because of we, but maybe they should be exercising I's opinion.
But if I opinion sort of reflects what the we wants, then you're not stepping on.
I agree, but
I mean, it's just like abortion. Some people believe in abortion, some people don't believe in abortion.
also, it's funny. I don't want to get to the abortion argument, but it's funny because this we said about anything. Some people
Right.
believe in abortion as a constitutional right, as a personal right, and they are themselves opposed to abortion. And that means thinking through a political issue carefully. When you could support an issue but be against it yourself, that means you've thought it through.
Oh, okay.
There's a famous speech. I may not agree with what you say, but I will defend to my death your right to say it. Well, that's
Right.
what that is.
Well, that's just because you take my phone calls, I agree with that one.
All right.
I know I'm a pain, but I love you.
You're
All
not
right,
a
we'll
pain,
talk to you
Jeff.
later.
Thanks very much. We have Mike on line 3. Mike? Well, Mike is a busy signal, which I haven't heard in a very long time. Mike, if you're listening to us, give us a call back. Be happy to take your call. Do we still have Pat on line 2? Pat, are you there? Hey there, how you doing?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How can I help you?
Yeah. Politics is emotion and ego. It's not. I don't know what you said it was, but if it's corrupted, it's going to always be emotion and ego. Otherwise, it's supposed to be good is good, bad is bad.
I agree.
So, yeah, because it's a lot of nostrums coming out of people. Just expressing a wish. You have to accept what you have. And when people's judgment gets impaired like that, you're always going to have that kind of polarization.
Well,
I don't know what to say. I mean, you got to be able to keep some kind of integrity.
Absolutely. Integrity, that's the key word. I tell you, man, that's the word I preach to my son over and over and over. And the illustration I use is, I've been practicing here since 1993. And I have a pretty good reputation, I believe, in front of judges throughout this whole 19th Judicial Circuit. And I think I probably get the benefit of the doubt a lot of times, if there are close calls. Because I think the judges realize that I'm going to tell them the truth. And even if a particular case, a legal precedent, doesn't go my way, I'm going to acknowledge it. I may try to escape it, but I'm at least going to acknowledge it. I'm not going to BS it. If I were to lie to a judge, not only would I would no longer have the respect of that judge. That judge will talk to every other judge in the circuit, and my reputation for integrity will be gone for years, decades, or perhaps forever. Integrity is easily lost. It's hard to gain.
It is. It's very. Your word is everything. I mean, as far as the Anointed One, I'd have to say the Anointed One is very much seething with jealousy when he says that he's talking to God and stuff. How does he know he's talking to God?
Who's talking to God? Are you talking about Trump or Romney?
I'm talking about Romney.
Okay.
Because he's he comes from a family of that, and this, he went on a side that basically called him every name in the book. He strapped a dog on a roof. He hates the poor. He and then he sides with them. He obviously is extremely jealous.
Romney is jealous? Oh, I don't agree with
you.
That's completely.
He's the Anointed One.
That's antithetical to everything I've said today.
I know it is.
I don't agree with you. Romney knows all the harshness that is hitting him right now, and he may lose his seat over it. He's not going to get a nice committee assignment, I can tell you, when the Republicans are in charge. He's done.
He committed suicide.
Well, why would somebody do that unless they believe? Why would somebody do that unless they believed it?
When you're a turncoat.
No, you're not a turncoat. Oh my God, that's the exact opposite of what I've been preaching. You're not a turncoat.
That's why I let you know.
All right.
That's why I wake you up when you're a deep emotion.
You're not a turncoat just because you vote against your party. Sometimes that means you're exercising integrity.
But he said things in the past that have been very, very.
I'm not even thinking about the past. I'm thinking about the speech he gave, how he came to his decision. And as
But I
far
noticed
as religion, okay, when he talks I, he's talking about his faith, his religious beliefs. He's not imposing them on anybody else, but he's
I
saying
understand.
that based upon his faith, he takes this obligation seriously, which is what everybody's supposed to do when they swear to tell the truth.
Even the way his speech was, I could tell that there was something wrong, meaning that he was a little caught up with his emotions.
Of course he
And
was
he was
caught up with his
unable-
emotions. He choked up when he talked about his faith because he very
If you
rarely
believe
talks about his
something, you
faith.
say it. If you believe something, you say it. You speak more in a certain manner. See, I can tell when people.
Then you don't know
speak, I
me.
can
You
tell.
don't know me. You've never seen me make a closing argument to a jury. You've never seen me shed a tear when I really believe my client has been harmed and that a jury has to vote a certain way to do justice. I'm sorry, I disagree with you. He choked up because he was expressing his faith in public, bearing himself, when everybody knows he's a man of faith, but he doesn't really talk about it. And if I'm making an argument that is really consequential, I'm going to choke up too. I do choke up. I choke up when I talk to my kid. I choke up when I talk to my girlfriend. Sometimes I choke up when I talk to my mother. But if I'm talking about something hard to talk about and it
Right.
matters to me, I'm the kind of guy I choke up. I'm sorry. I don't think that's.
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
think you can interpret
I think
anything from Romney choking up.
I just thought he sounded different. His voice sounded like there was more.
Yeah, this was a hard thing he did. Nobody has done it in history of our nation. This was
I don't think it was
hard.
that hard. I don't think it was that
Oh,
hard.
come on.
The hatred for the guy is widespread. It's not that hard. It's not like you're going
So
against
you
somebody
believe
who's
that everything he
extremely
said,
popular.
you believe that everything he said about how he reached his vote was a crock of BS.
I think that
All right.
who is he to say that he spoke to God? I mean, how does he know
He
he's
didn't
speaking
say he
to
spoke
God?
to God. I listened to the entire speech and I've read it 3 times. He did not say he spoke to God. He talked about his faith and what he believes his faith requires of him. He never said he spoke to God or God spoke to him. And I can
Yeah,
respect
okay.
your right to believe how you believe. But I must say I can't disagree with you more. And unlike certain other, Rush Limbaugh, I'm not going to hang up on you. Okay? But I can't disagree with you more.
No,
To me, it was a profile in courage.
That's why we have discussions. But if it gets too much, where one side just wants to say, I hate you because you think this. Why don't you take a little time to, see the side and what is with everybody?
Well, on that I agree with you.
If you don't have this opinion, I don't like you. And then you got a situation where everybody in government's one profession. You're supposed to have. And then they use that word diversity. They're using it in the wrong way.
Well,
It
you're
should be
right about that too.
multi-professional.
So you're right
They
about
should
a
be-
number
they
of
should-
things, and then I can't disagree with you more on other things, which makes it interesting.
Right.
Which
I don't know
means
why people
you're
aren't
not
interested
you're
in
not an
learning.
evil person because I'm agreeing with you on some stuff. You have
Right,
perspectives
But
that
sometimes we agree with the wrong, reason. But sometimes I like to just hear more logical, openness of conversation. We're saying, wow,
and
man, I didn't look at it
unfortunately
that way.
that is gone on all the talk show cable networks. It's all opinion. It's all panels screaming over each other. It's unfortunately the way it has turned out now. I don't agree with the way it's handled, but I know I can't single-handedly
Right.
change anything. I can only, if it has to do with law at all, and I enjoy it, I'm interested in politics, I can speak about it and try to, listen to you, agree with you where I agree with you, disagree with you where I disagree with you, and tell you the truth. I agree with you here, and I can't disagree with you more here. And, to me,
Right,
that's
yeah,
at least
right.
having a conversation.
Yeah, like what you said about Rama. If he said he didn't speak to God, then you're right. But I thought he did. That's why I said, "Oh, this guy, he's
Let me suggest
speaking to
you
God."
just Google the speech. It's not very long. Google the speech, read the text. I mean, I think you'll
Right.
see I'm right. Anyway, we have about 3 minutes left.
Hey, good show.
So thank you for calling. I appreciate it. It's been a fun
Appreciate
show. And hopefully, somebody has heard me and maybe agrees with some of what I say. This is tough. This is a tough time in our history, no matter who you are. We have an election coming up. That's going to be tough. It's going to be dirty. It's going to be brutal. It's going to be expensive. And we'll see where we come out in November of 2020. Whichever side prevails, the other side's going to be screaming bloody murder and hopefully not screaming that somebody else stole the election. And hopefully we have no foreign interference. But it's our election. And it's our country. It's our election. We have the right to make the decision and not be lied to, influenced deceptively, underhandedly by any foreign entities. Anyway, I thank everybody for their political calls. We didn't really have any legal, I'm going to sue somebody or I think I'm going to be sued calls, but if you have any of those issues, feel free to give Sadia a call at my office at 781-8003. Maybe next week we can get away from politics and go back to law. Maybe, I don't know. I thought that's what I was here for, but then a lot, it seems, life throws a curveball and you just got to react. And I'll be honest with you, I enjoy the fact that I have a forum to do this. I hope you enjoy the discussion. It's going to be a long haul as we watch this over and over day by day until it's done. I hope you all have a great weekend. Have a nice week leading up to good old Valentine's Day. And I'll be back next Friday, and we'll see what we can talk about then. Thanks very much for listening. This is Stuart Address, and this has been Ask a Lawyer. Ask a Rabbi follows.
Ask a Lawyer with Stuart M. Address has archives of this show stored on YouTube. Look for WPSL TV on YouTube, and then you'll find Ask a Lawyer. And speaking of the rabbi, Ask a Rabbi follows CBS News coming up next right here on Digital 15.
Well, I have the highest praise here on Facebook Live. Mommy says, love the show. You did great.
All right.
Thank you, Mommy.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, WSTU Stewart.